What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker, Head of Partnerships and Revenue at Sales Hacker. And thank you for spending some of your Tuesday with us. I know we all lead very busy lives, so we don't take it lightly when you do carve out some time to learn with us. And excuse the hotel room in the back. I'm currently down at the B2B Marketing Exchange, so the hustle doesn't stop. But if anyone is in Scottsdale, let me know. Hit me up, and we'll hang out. All right, what are we talking about today? We are talking about how metric-driven sales teams can create winning cultures, and specifically kind of bridging this gap from coaching to KPIs and everything in between. And what we're hoping that you'll kind of take away from this today is some tips for using real-time data to increase the effectiveness of your one-on-ones, a few techniques for training new team members to really increase time to value, a few contests to ignite that competitive spirit, and then, of course, the KPIs that every sales leader should be tracking to repeatedly hit and exceed revenue targets. And I have an awesome guest with me today. But before I introduce him, really quickly, some housekeeping items. Number one, so this will be like a presentation style. So we've got some really good meaty content with a deck for you. But as always, we want to hear from you. So if you have a question, that's relevant to what we're discussing, please jump on. Let us know your name, your title, where you're from, and ask away, because these webinars are, of course, for you, the community. And then number two, as always, these will be recorded. So Ambition, our partners, will actually be sending out the recording probably about 24 hours. So don't worry if you don't get it right away. You got to jump off, close a deal, please do so. All right, we got that out of the way. I want to introduce my guest. I am joined by Brian Troutchold. Brian, welcome to the community.
Scott, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, pumped to have you. And as always, like to add a little bit of color. So for those of you who have not heard of Brian, Brian is the co-founder and COO over at Ambition, which is the acclaimed sales performance management platform built for data-driven sales organizations. And at Sales Hacker, big fans of Ambition and Brian personally. So if you want to connect with Brian, Twitter and LinkedIn are the best way to do something. And how you start a conversation is always going to be sales, startups, marketing, and NBA trade rumors. What's going on in the NBA right now? Any rumors circulating?
Yeah, if any of you guys want to connect with me, just fire an NBA trade rumor and I will be with you in moments. I'll cancel this webinar really quick. Nothing today. I've been locked in since Scott got this on my calendar, but tons of stuff going around sales and sales management for sure.
Love it. I love it. So yeah, if any of you guys have NBA questions, we'll save those ones for a different webinar maybe. But all right. So I like to do this traditionally when we do these webinars, just so we know exactly who's joining us. We had some really good registration for this one, almost 1,000 people joining. So I want to know a few things. What your role is. Are you an individual contributor? Are you a manager? Or are you like director level and above? And that should help us kind of frame this conversation moving forward. So we'll take 30 seconds, do a quick poll.
I want to know too. So I hope people are filling this out because I want to make sure we're talking to the right audience and the folks who are on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always interesting. It really varies day by day. So I'm excited. All right, we'll end it in 3, 2, 1, and we'll end it. Okay, let's check out the results. Okay, cool. Okay, so pretty even split. Again, this is crazy. So individual contributor, 25%, manager, 36%, director level and above, again, is the majority at 41%, which is really cool. So thank you, everyone, for that. And that's going to help us as we go along. And without further ado, Brian, I'm going to flip it back to you. We are going to turn our cameras off just to conserve bandwidth as we kind of go through it, but then we'll flip them back on when we do a Q&A at the end. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let me do that. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So it's great to know who's on and who we have. Just another quick tidbit about myself. Like Scott said, I'm the co-founder of Ambition. Ambition is a sales management and performance management platform for modern sales organizations. So what we think about is exactly this topic every single day. And I'm really proud to say we work with, what I think are some of the most sophisticated and the most forward-thinking sales organizations in the world. So they're trying to answer these same questions every day, and we're lucky enough to grok some of their expertise as we provide them some tools to do it. Jumping right in, I think the first question when we're talking about how to create a great sales culture is the question of, what is culture and why does it matter for an organization? I'd be remiss if I said it's not a pretty hot buzzword right now. And I think the trend started with the rise of millennials like myself and maybe I think Scott becoming the majority of the workforce. But I think that it's safe to say that trend is going to be here for a while. And if you look at any sales job posting on LinkedIn today, culture is definitely going to be mentioned in that posting. So, sure, you have to have a great product. You have to hire great people. But what keeps those people on your team and what grows the success of the team and the performance over time is going to be that culture. So, for us and our customers, we strive to create what we call the winning sales culture. And it looks a lot like this. It's not magic. You're probably reading my Venn diagram here. It's really not that complicated. And I don't think that it's some unattainable it factor that only super cool companies that you read about in Silicon Valley have, or, only the best, most savvy sales leaders can create. But those folks do understand that cultivating a great sales culture is ongoing. It's a measurable process, and they can deliver real results if they commit to it. So from a high level, I think it's pretty straightforward. There are three things sales leaders can do to turn culture from that vague buzzword into a real actionable plan on their sales floor. And it starts with number one, and this is the top circle, my green circle here. I believe it starts with transparency, providing crystal clear KPIs and goals and expectations for the team. That really helps reps drive towards those KPIs. When you establish them, you provide clarity, you provide transparency. What that drives towards is part two, which is the purple coaching circle. That's an effective long-term coaching and development program. And what that's geared toward, once you have crystal clear KPIs and goals, is it's turning reps into better sellers. They're continually monitoring themselves. They can be what we call self-accountable to the numbers and to the metrics. And they can see how they're progressing, both in their skill set and growing in their career. And last is about keeping folks engaged and excited. So I like to call this, it's everything, including contests and incentives. But, some people used to call this gamification. Some people call this just, hey, we run contests and spiffs. Whatever you call it, I think about it in terms of engagement. And all three of them have to work together. It doesn't work when you're just doing these three circles alone. They intersect, they support one another. And, it's my hypothesis that you can't drive a winning culture without each of these three. So as we dig in further here, we're gonna knock out some agenda goals. And over the course of the webinar, I'm going to try to get through as much as possible so we can answer questions in a timely fashion and we don't have to stay here all afternoon. But I'm going to knock out three main areas of creating a winning sales culture. Number one, setting clear and actionable goals that move the needle. Before you can ramp up your program, and before I think your team can really be a high-performing group, you've got to set clear, actionable goals that are attainable. Next, number two, metric-driven coaching techniques that actually increase accountability. We'll talk about applying a repeatable metric-driven template to your coaching and why that matters to make sure your one-on-ones are high impact, actionable, and get consistent, what I call accomplishment. They get done. And 3, contests, competitions, and incentives that actually motivate and engage all your people. Notice the emphasis on the word all. It's great to have rewards and incentives for the people at the top who are really killing it, but you want to make sure that you're getting everyone fired up, everyone performing at their highest potential capacity, hopefully beyond that, to be honest. And we've seen it time and time and again in our customers. Great incentives fuel amazing performance. So let's get right on to point number 1. It's probably a no-brainer that great teams need great people, but hiring and onboarding is just the beginning of creating that great sales culture. One of the first steps to getting everyone on your team invested in winning together is to set clear, actionable goals and communicate those KPIs to everyone on the team from the top down. And I want to get in and figure out how we define those KPIs. The first question when I talk to a sales organization is always the same. What is the target? What does this team need to accomplish for the business? Typically for sales leaders, that's a revenue number. It doesn't have to be. I'm sure some of you guys on here have what I would say is an asterisk. You may say, I'm an SDR leader. I'm a renewals team lead. Great. This applies to you. The number one thing you have to think about is, what is the number your team is responsible for hitting as a unit? And that can be quarterly, that can be annually. Hopefully it's really easy. You're automatically like, oh yeah, it's this. And hopefully you can break that down into chunks throughout the year that are a little bit more bite-sized. Once again, I know we've got different folks on the webinar. So if you're seeing revenue goal and you're thinking that's not for me, that's okay. I know you've got a target that you're shooting for every single year. So now hopefully in your mind, you're thinking, okay, we're supposed to do X as a unit. With that North Star goal in place, what I like to do is start reverse engineering your sales funnel or your goal funnel by, I like to think about this in opportunity stage or prospect stage. So, as you're defining these activities that impact the ultimate result you want, is you want to work backwards. So, really simple case, you want to think about going from a closed deal to maybe the step before that was sending an RFP, maybe the step before that was a demo, and maybe even before that was a first meeting, and that was impacted by a cold call. So you can really quickly map that out, and you figure out that there's this series of behind the scenes lagging indicators that are directly, and sometimes maybe a little bit more indirectly, tied to getting to that closed won deal. You've really got to map that out. And we have a great guide that I'll send to everyone on the webinar today about moving the middle and how managers can do this with plugging in their specific sales pipeline. But what I would always do as a manager, and I'm sure everyone here can do it if you're using a tool like Salesforce or some of the other folks in the CRM market, is you can pull some historical figures. You can look at how this has progressed for the various people in your group, and you can come to a number that is going to be reasonable and that will let you choose those activities that impact that conversion. And last, you're going to create SMART goals. And I'm sure there's a couple of people over here, groaning. Maybe some people are like, oh yeah, I just read about this. And some of you are saying, what's a SMART goal? Well, I'm glad you asked. SMART is a great litmus test we talk about with our customers all the time. And if you want to go through my infographic here, that's great. I'll also tell you what it is. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Some of you folks may be in the advanced class, and you may be using the FAST goals framework, which I'm also a big fan of, which just for the acronym folks out there, frequently discussed, ambitious, which I like a lot, specific, and transparent. But let's talk about SMART today, because I really think this is a leverage point for coaches, sales managers, directors who are on this call to start thinking about how you communicate these KPIs and you work them into your coaching cadence and your culture of the organization. So as you're thinking about how to set the goals and KPIs in your organization, here's a quick thought experiment. Let's think about this in terms of an SDR. An SDR has a series of targets they're trying to achieve on a daily basis that gets them to ultimately creating pipeline for an inside sales team. And for those who don't know, SDR, sales development rep. So the first thing as a manager I may do is make a specific target, 50 outbound calls per day, very specific. Next, I'm going to go to my measurable. Are my folks able to log this call in a system? Are they able to easily complete these tasks? Basically, is it measurable? There's a ton of tools out there that can help with this. Folks like our friends at Outreach, folks like DialSource. There's a bunch of great tools in the space that automatically log, make it very easy to measure those KPIs. Number 3, I think about is the KPI achievable? In this case, just using the 50 outbound dials per day, that's nothing crazy. Like it's not unheard of that reps could do 80 or 100 or 150 calls per day. What I don't want to see when I'm setting goals or I'm working with a client is someone say, well, I know they need to make 1,000 calls per day. And I realize, that's not an achievable target for salespeople to be working on. 4th, is it relevant? I think most of the folks on this call probably are on the same page as me here, but in your own organization, you may need to think about this a little bit more as you build these out. But for an SDR or an inside sales rep, outbound calls are still highly effective. I promise. I still answer my cell when people call me. So I think that it's a pretty decent way to work towards your goal. And lastly, is it time bound? I can tell my wife any day of the week that I'm going to go lose 10 pounds and not set an end time on it. It's not going to be too hard for me to say 2 years from now, hey, I did it. But it's much more effective when I put hey, I'm going to do this by the end of the month. So in our case here, we're talking about daily, which checks on box. Pro tip, awesome. Got a couple of these sprinkled in. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love that SMART framework, and it's one I've used personally for a while, and it's great. The time bound is like extremely, extremely important, or I find I literally get nothing done if I don't have a goal with kind of my execution date lined up. If I don't do that, then it's kind of just a pipe dream.
It's an extra layer of accountability, and it puts some boundaries on you, obviously, and I absolutely agree. I have to do it, and I make myself, even with stuff that's not metric driven in my life now, I'm like, I've got to accomplish this by X day. If I don't, I'm losing. So absolutely agree, Scott.
Yeah. And quickly, Brian, before you proceed, so we've got a great question here, kind of a clarifying question from the community. And the question is 50 outbound calls the actual metric you use at Ambition today?
Great question. And I'll go a level deeper because on our team, we are segmented. So we create specific metrics and specific, what we call scorecards for the different roles within our sales organizations. We have inbound SDRs, outbound SDRs, what we call account executives who sell to the middle and SMB market, and we have enterprise account executives. And so for our outbound SDRs, that's actually very close. I think they do about 60 calls per day. Inbound is doing a different set of calls. They're responding to folks who come in. And just to give you a extra level of clarity, our outbound account executives, they don't do as many calls. They work with fewer accounts. They're in touch with those people much more closely. So it's not really relevant. And it's really not part of their achievable set of targets to focus on that. So that's a great question. I guess the answer is yes for one specific segment of our sales organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you have to segment that out. And I've even heard of organizations going, even a step further on like an individual basis. And you can even look at that as like, sometimes there's outbound reps who are like just monsters at crafting like really well-written emails that get a really high response rate. And then there's those reps that, can make the 100 calls a day and book 3 meetings kind of thing. And I've even heard of, taking what you said there, even a step further and going on an individual basis, setting individual KPIs, which I thought is something pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I touch on this here in a minute, but as we're talking about it, let's riff on it for a second. We actually really, I would say, advocate for that. We use a system called Scorecards, which is basically taking multiple of these metrics, setting a baseline target for what we expect for each, but performance isn't tied to, okay, I just hit the target for metric 1, 2, 3, and 4. It is, I have success by, my kind of holistic approach, my balanced approach to these things. So maybe I'm a rep who, I'm a great emailer. I do great on LinkedIn outreach. I don't need to make my 50 calls. As long as I'm doing the other things and I'm having success with the next stage in the funnel, to me, it's okay. Like, I'm getting the performance I want. I can see the activity and effort are there. And I think that's kind of, like you said, Scott, the next layer up in sophistication is you can kind of start to map the overall performance you want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Great question. Please keep them coming. I'll stop as we get them in. And like I was saying before, we've got pro tips sprinkled in here a little bit. And, I think it's obvious, and folks may think about this. Of course, all goals and KPIs are not equal. What does that mean? Well, as you're creating these, I want to really emphasize that there's a difference in creating KPIs or targets that are just individual focused, like 50 calls per day, versus ones that are team oriented. And this is where we see people get a really great culture, started in a company when they do things like, not only do I have a set of KPIs like 50 calls per day, or maybe 2 meetings set per SDR per week, but they start to create team-oriented goals and targets and KPIs. And so those may not even be daily. That may be something like at Ambition, we want our SDRs to create a certain number of inbound meetings as a group per month. We want them to create a certain amount of outbound meetings per group per month. And we want a certain conversion rate of those meetings to opportunities. Now, before we get too deep into the weeds on the numbers there, the reason is really simple. And what we're trying to do is create a level of, peer-to-peer accountability, some buy-in from the group that is very obvious, like, here's what we're shooting for, here's the reason, and we're always trying to align whatever target and goal that we're setting with what's the business case. Well, in this case, we want to, as a group, provide this many meetings set or this many opportunities to our account executive team. So to do that, if you're looking at Scott and I, in February, Scott may be really killing it. He may be pulling more of the weight for the team goal, but I don't want to let him down. So I need to bring as much to the table as I can. And I think it's really powerful when organizations start to get into this mindset of, it's not just about the individual number. It's also about what are we doing as a group and how does that affect our organization. Moving to the next key point, into the coaching side, you've got some of those KPIs maybe noodling in your brain right now. You're going to go look at some reports later, and you're going to create those as actionable and clear to your team. The next question is, how do you actually hold everyone accountable to hitting the minor metric targets, the big goals, and while also ensuring that they're developing and growing? That's a big question. I think it's the area where especially our customers in the mid-market and the enterprise sometimes struggle at scale. And one of the things that we've found to be incredibly powerful is you have to provide not only recurring, frequent feedback, but also insights that are necessary so people can look at the numbers, look inward, and figure out what they need to improve to achieve those targets. It's not just about a manager saying, hey, Brian, I heard your demo. It's not great. Can you work on it? It's about bringing continual feedback week to week. And then when there's a number to back that up saying, hey, Brian, your demos convert at 10% less than HANA's. Let's dig into why that is. well, now we have some real meat to that conversation, and we're talking about very specific conversion rates or performance that we can work on. One thing that I think is interesting, and I'm going to hit you guys with some stats here to back this up in a minute, but the International Coaching Foundation, the ICF, or Federation, excuse me, ICF, which is a real thing, conducted a worldwide survey that found effective business coaching equals a huge impact and incredible amount of money to organizations. I'm going to walk through some of these key findings. The first is that the average ROI was at least 50 times the initial investment of coaching for participants in the survey, which is insane. And one thing that we find when we're talking to these large sales organizations specifically is everyone talks about coaching. Everyone knows that it's going to be a priority for them in the next fiscal year or on the next set of initiatives we're rolling out. But it's really hard for them to figure out, okay, what's the impact? How do I do it? And, I'll keep going with some of these stats. According to our friends at Brainshark, companies with dynamic sales coaching programs achieve higher win rates to the tune of 28%, which, I know Ambition's numbers pretty well. And if we were increasing 28% on our win rates, we'd feel really good about the year already. So not only can you increase those win rates by, dynamic, what I think of as like very frequent agile touches in the coaching program, but it's not that you just are leaving potential gains on the table that you could be better at. You're actually not hitting the mark, and you're going to lose team members. So this is one of the things I think comes up a lot when directors, you folks, VPs, think about how coaching can impact your organization. Salespeople expect the ongoing training and advancement in their workplace, in their environment. At minimum, making the time to align on those goals not only is going to be really healthy and keep your individual contributors and your managers on the same page, but there's a huge value in decreasing attrition and making sure you're not having to use additional time to hire, train, and onboard new team members. The secret to a good coaching program is it holds everyone accountable, not just the sales rep or salesperson, but also the manager and hopefully their managers, if they're seeing the results from these things. I know that we've got a large percentage of managers on the call and maybe some reps who even hate to hear this, but the saying always goes that I truly believe it. Employees rarely leave a good company, but they consistently leave bad managers. Cliche as that is, I do think that's true. And here's another unsurprising stat. You're 95% more likely to complete a goal. Like this is exactly, Scott, what you just said. Any goal where there's a specific accountability appointment with yourself, but better off with another person that you've committed it to. Here's another acronym group, the American Society of Training and Development, also found that your likelihood of developing new habits is remarkably higher when you set a time to revisit the goals you've set with someone to monitor your progress. We've got a ton of resources and PDFs, best practices, on how to do this with your sales organization. I think anyone can walk off this call today and say, all right, I can go do this if I commit to it, and I can see results on my team just by being a little bit what I would call, better about accountability and communication. I'll do a few more quick hits because I think these were some great things that we found from our user base when polling them. And here's some tidbits from great sales leaders on what they do and don't do. And I like the way that our team set this up. Just say no to the annual review. I've been talking about this for about 2 years, so it's maybe a broken record at this point. But at scale, when you've got multiple reps in your organization, the amount of communication or real deep touch points between a manager and rep can decrease. It's very easy to get into this annual or biannual cycle. The practice of frequent one-on-one coaching programs that focus on personal development, individual team goals, like we've been talking about, and that recurring feedback loop that pinpoints the explicit areas of improvement and the focal points where a rep can do better, that is so much better than a check-in at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, after the quarter more likely. and saying, hey, you didn't really bring it this quarter. I think we're all, at the point now where we understand that. We've seen this kind of performance management revolution happening. But when I get into sales orgs, that's a lot of times how they're coaching their teams is on an annual basis. The second is something I call water cooler coaching or coffee session coaching. You used to get the IM from your boss. So it's like, hey, let's go grab coffee real quick and we'll talk about your pipeline or whatever. That's not very effective. And the reason is sessions shouldn't be overly informal. Obviously, they shouldn't be scary. You want to get the best out of your reps. Your reps should expect that from you as a manager. But it's also, I think it's a disservice to the salesperson or the teammate you're managing when they happen on the fly. There's no agenda. No one's taking notes. And you're just kind of like, hey, how are things going? That's cool. Do that. That's a great manager to check on their people. But if that's how you're coaching, I think you're leaving a lot on the table, and your reps probably feel that over the course of your relationship. Last but not least, in a lot of orgs I've been in here early in my career, data and the transparency of my performance was sometimes very lacking. And so there'd be a data silo where a manager or sales leaders could see how everyone was doing. Maybe they're running these Salesforce reports. Maybe more likely they have Excel going and they're looking across a few different metrics. But a rep may not have very good clarity on that going into a conversation. So it may be really hard for a rep to see, am I doing well? Am I not doing well? How am I achieving versus a variety of objectives and goals in real time? And so you walk into a coaching session and the rep is surprised, which is not a great case scenario. We'll talk about the inverse of that in a second. But sharing as much data, providing as much transparency to how reps are doing is obviously a win in a modern sales organization. What you should be doing, what I'd love for everyone to be doing, and what we talk about a lot on our blog and with our content, number one is the best sales leaders are consistent. Programs, one-on-one coaching program, team coaching program should be in a similar format. They should be scheduled on a frequent, recurring basis to ensure that kind of continuous development, but also to make sure that the communication is continual. They should use data. Pairing these coaching sessions with real performance KPIs is obviously, the example I gave before, it's much more impactful than saying your demo is not great to saying your demo is off by X percentage or your conversion is off by this percent versus your peers. And that gives someone a very visceral understanding of what they're not doing as well as someone else. And they can then go say, hey, I want to go sit with that person. I want to listen to their demo. I want to hear the words they're using versus what I'm doing. Counter to the coffee meeting, being prepared, coming with notes. Something that we talk a lot about with Ambition is sending questions to the reps or rep before the meeting and then reviewing those answers. I don't want to ever just look at the numbers. The numbers are great. I want the context behind them. And I think every sales manager wants to dig into that as quickly as they can in the session. It's even better when you come prepared and you say, tell me about what you meant here. Tell me about what was happening here where you felt like you could do better. Now you're having a productive session minute 1 versus maybe minute 14 when you're catching up the rest of the time. And ideally, as I said, reps don't want to be surprised. I know that managers don't want to be surprised either. So there should never be a surprise at the beginning of the meeting or worst case, the end, where they say, oh, by the way, this isn't happening. That should already be on the docket to discuss when you get there. And then leaving, this is something that great managers have been talking about forever. I think it's just flipping into the sales world, but setting real action items. So, whatever happens in the meeting, whatever conclusions are arrived at, setting a real actionable, tangible goal, target, activity to happen for the next time is really critical. And maybe that sounds, I don't think it sounds burdensome, but it's really easy to get into that cadence. And then it's a great positive dopamine feedback loop when you get to tell your manager in passing or on Slack or an email, hey, by the way, that thing that we said I was going to do by next month, I did it 4 days later. I did it a week later. And you get to knock that out. Another one of the pro tips, we talked a lot about how metrics get logs and being able to see these things. One thing I can't emphasize enough is getting your team some level of automation to drive this visibility. When I say automation, not only am I talking about keeping track of the goals and the KPIs and the reporting somewhere, that's great. I'm obviously a huge fan of that. That's part of what Ambition does, but also make it easy for them to do it without a ton of manual steps. So there's a lot of great companies that do that. When I was talking about, I mentioned Outreach, DialSource. There's a bunch more. And the data doesn't have to just be about calls or emails. There's tons of other things that you may want to track. But putting the burden on your reps to go fill out 10 or 15 fields manually in Salesforce is going to become a hassle. I definitely understand that as a former rep. And so the more you can use tools to minimize that friction, the better off you are. Okay, this is the fun part. So engaging your team with contests, competitions, incentives to drive real behavior and to drive real change in the organization. These type of things sometimes get swept into that. That's not going to have real results. That's not going to actually change the performance of my group. Hopefully, if you're hiring the type of salespeople that we like to hire and that we like to work with, they're pretty competitive. The generations are changing. It's not just about, how much money can I make in my comp plan or how much, additional compensation or commission did I get last week. There are a lot of different, I think, layers to how the younger millennial people in your organization are motivated and get excited. But that doesn't mean that, contest incentives don't work anymore. And so I'm gonna have a couple best practices here about what we see from our constituents and our customer base. First is a warning. So one thing to know, and if you've got 10 reps, 100 reps, 2,000 reps, this will be pretty much similar across those groups. A consistent reason organizations struggle with incentives is oftentimes the same group of people will win. And this is something where you say, hey, we've got President's Club and the person, the 5 people with the top quota attainment or the top dollars closed one for the year, they're going on the trip or they're going to dinner with the CEO. Well, in a lot of organizations, that's the same couple of people year after year. And so, in this case, 90 to maybe 75% of your organization are left out. So I think it's behoove of the leader and the manager to get creative. It's also important to communicate. And I'll talk about this more in a second, but a lot of times my second warning to folks is that they run really creative or really, what I think sometimes are overly complex incentives or competitions, but then they don't tell anyone about them. They don't have a great system to communicate those things. Maybe they have a sales ops person or an analyst somewhere who's running reports from Salesforce and they're aggregating it all in Excel and sending it out at the end of the month. Well, there's a lot of time lag between month to month and the changes that happen from a performance standpoint. So you want to get creative with the different variety of metrics you're competing on or you're contesting with. I'll talk about that in a second. But you also want to communicate it. Thirdly, and this is where I think a lot of the language can get confusing, but people just think about the rewards from their incentives and not the alignment of what type of metrics and behavior they're trying to drive. As our VP of sales, Martin McWater, says, and he talks to a lot of other VPs, his peers, Amazon gift cards are the grandma or your grandma's incentives. This is like getting the birthday present. It's like a $5 bill. It's like white bread. It's not exciting. And, I've had a lot of managers in the past who are giving out like the $10 Starbucks gift card every single week. Well, 4 weeks in a row, like there's only so many chai lattes I can drink and I'm just over it. So for a younger workforce, for a more millennial workforce, at least, maybe I'll say it that way, experiences, opportunities to connect with company leaders, activities the entire team or that a larger group of folks within the organization can be a part of. Those are the real reward incentives and carrots that I think get people really engaged today. It doesn't have to be super complex. I'll give you an example in a second. And it doesn't need to be expensive. It may just take a little bit more creativity and a little bit more thought than, oh, I'm going to go get, a few gift cards down at my Starbucks. As my friend Lauren Bailey at Factor 8 says, authenticity matters. So you need to think a little bit about the fit of the reward to the type of culture you want and the type of team you have. That can be taken a lot of different ways. If you've got a lot of folks on your organization who don't care about your local Major League Baseball team, but you do, taking a bunch of people to sit in a box at a Major League Baseball game may not be the best incentive for them. Maybe it's something else that they might be into. I've heard some, awesome ones with organizations who everyone goes to the blowout bar. I've heard of ones that everyone goes on, a cocktail cruise and all the way up. So be creative, be authentic, as Lauren says. And here's a good example of one, I'll throw our own team under the bus here. A little bit silly, but incredibly effective. For the last 2 years in Q3, we've had a ton of success driving revenue, like booked revenue, closed won deals with this custom billboard campaign. So this is downtown Nashville. You're seeing in the background, Mark McWaters. He graduated from mid-market to enterprise rep to team lead to now VP of sales. And he's won this competition 2 years in a row before being promoted to not being a part of it, or not being eligible, I should say, anymore. What's amazing, we let this be totally custom. Whoever wins, they get to put whatever they want on a billboard for 2 weeks. I think a lot of you folks would be shocked at how inexpensive billboards are these days. 2, this guy had like 100 text messages in the first 2 days after putting this up in Nashville, where he lives. And he had a ton of fun with that. I mean, this is like his wife's friend sending him text messages, all kinds of stuff. So the impact for him was huge. The cost to ambition was very low. Does this thing sell anything of our company? No, it is completely silly. But people loved it in downtown Nashville, and he heard about it a ton, which mattered. And our team crushed the year over year, both quarters we ran this. We're going to run it again this year, so no one steal this idea. We need this.
That's an awesome idea, and I think people are going to steal it. That's unfortunate what happens when you put it out in the world, but that's a great idea, man. I like that. That's okay.
Just don't use any of our markets, because I need those the prices to stay relatively low. And one, our team, we talk about this a lot. A good incentive is, something your team, desperately wants, something they're going to get really excited and engaged about. It shouldn't be something they need. You don't want this to be like, hey, this is the only way I'm putting food on my table, or like, this is the only way I'm doing X. This should be above and beyond the norm. And I think about this a lot, like something they would never buy or do themselves. We had an incentive last year it was a team incentive. When the team hit a specific stretch goal, we'd all go skydiving. And this was amazing because we're in Slack all day. We've got people traveling continually. And half our team, myself included, are terrified of skydiving. I did not want to win it. But it was a continual point of conversation and discussion within our organization, because, no one was going to go as a group. They weren't going to organize it. But we put that out there as a stretch, that if we go do this number of revenue or dollars of new revenue, here's what we're going to do. Talking about some examples from, our customer base who do care about baseball. We've had people take entire teams to baseball games, with the leadership of the organization. This is awesome for folks like SDRs or younger folks in the organization, for them to have access to maybe the VP of sales, maybe, if it's possible, the CEO or similar type roles. It's an incredibly, I think exciting thing for young people and early folks in their career to be able to get that access and to be recognized and hang out with for a few hours higher level people in the organization. So once again, these don't have to be super expensive. They don't need a big price tag. They don't need to be overly optimized or logistic out to a level where you don't want to manage it. But with just a little bit of creativity, you can get a lot out of it. Back to what I was saying before on visibility. There's a primary reason folks, I think, miss out on the results they're hoping for. A lot of times it's lack of communication. You don't have to go this far. This is a TV in an office, everyone's results up there in real time. But, not having competition progress or not updated standings in real time are, critical ways that you can miss out on the type of achievement you want or the type of buy-in that is possible. And this can be really simple. So once again, I'll give a quick example where someone has done a great job of building this into the culture of their organization. They set up automated reports. They used Ambition for this, but you can do this a bunch of different ways, where an automated alert would send an email to the VP of sales, the CEO, and I think the CRO every time a specific milestone was hit. And what that allowed for was, let's just use Scott here. Scott closes a big deal. Those folks may not hear about that typically until the end of week meeting, maybe the end of month meeting. Instead, they got an email, picture of Scott, a nice little blip about what had just happened, and he was on it. And so they could just reply all real quick. Great job, Scott. Love it. Keep going. That's awesome. There's nothing better than the CEO, 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 minutes after you close a big deal, giving you a shout out in email and a virtual pat on the back, if you will. And this quote is really stuck with me from Lauren. Once again, I'll give her a shout out. She does a great job in the community, and I'll just read it out loud. As managers, our job is to celebrate the early small wins and the big failures of our team. Callback, that's awesome. Conversations, definitely awesome. Hang-ups, why not? You're trying. The effort is there. Now it's time to be better. That's the key to building a flexible, fun, open, authentic organization. And, from a taking a step back, culture is pretty amorphous. It's a little bit different in every organization. It's very much, I think, a reflection of the people you have. And for every big win and celebration milestone, there's probably a bunch of losses. You've got to get really comfortable early on, whether it's recognizing the little things that are awesome, whether it's doing a high five right after someone gets hung up on. I've heard a ton of SaaS organizations do that, whatever. But you're creating that fun culture of recognition and a reward cycle, even on just the dopamine rush of a high five. It's pretty powerful. And last pro tip before we wrap, I mentioned before this kind of concept of scorecards, and in organizations you've got that 10% of the top who are winning a lot. You've got a lot of folks in the middle who may not be as apt to get onto the top of the leaderboard or to win the contest, what have you. So it's really important to have, what I call a breadbasket of different variety of metrics or KPIs and goals that you're focused on. Your team isn't one monolith. Everyone's not a clone. They're not doing the exact same things with the exact same conversion rate. And so I really advocate this concept of overall performance scores, which lets your team compete, maybe be recognized on their own personal, as Scott was saying, like people do this at a rep level in some cases. Other times they do it as a team segment basis, but on their own performance to the variety of benchmarks and targets that they have, instead of just a single factor. When you can get your people to really focus and hone in on a variety of metrics that contribute to a successful pipeline or creating a deep bench of meetings for a rep or, exceeding quota, that's big. That's going to have a big impact. It's going to be a sustainable recipe for success for them. And if you're doing multiple metrics, I believe this, and I believe our data backs it up, you're going to have your middle performers engaged and they're going to improve over time. And when you mix in the overall performance metrics, team, group-based stuff in terms of goals and KPIs, you get a lot of overlap of all these things touching each other, and people really bought into what the organization is trying to do and how to do it, which is what you want, and you all know that. So last slide for me here before our key takeaways. Remember this: transparency, clear KPIs, coaching, recurring, consistent, data-driven sessions on a recurring basis. And you want to engage these folks to change behavior, to change their focus to the align with the metrics you care about, and really engage the whole organization. Key takeaways, I'll wrap these up quick so we can get to a few questions. Culture is much more than a buzzword. It doesn't happen overnight. You guys can all drive it measurably by making a few changes and doing a little bit by little each month and each quarter. Clear KPIs drives alignment. Make them smart, as Scott mentioned, and he talked about personal experience. Coaching program is no longer a nice to have. If you're not coaching and developing and improving your team, I think that you're going to lose some of your team over time. Inconsistency and poor measurement are the enemy of good coaching. If you're not coming into those sessions with clear KPI performance, areas of improvement, specific, explicit areas where folks can be better, they're going to struggle, and they're probably going to be like, "Why is he picking on me today?" And last but not least, incentives really don't need to cost a fortune to have a big impact. I actually think that the more you can focus on the creative, the experiential, the recognition driven, that's where you're going to win. It's not about giving away a big prize and writing a big check every single time. That's what commission and quota are for. So last but not least, once again, I'm Brian Troutfield. I really appreciate Scott having me. I'll open it up to questions. If you do have a question you want to continue and connect with us over email, send an email to growth@ambition.com. I'd love to connect offline and answer any questions you have. Scott, do we have anything to talk about from the audience?
We do, absolutely. We got some great questions, and we probably have time for 2 or maybe 3 questions here. So thank you, everyone, for the great engagement. Let's pop on the video so you can see us again. All right, let's go. I love some of the really specific questions, because these are obviously people that are going through these problems right now. And here's one I really like. So we've got some player coaches. So I'm assuming they mean someone who holds a bag and is also acting as a manager. In your mind, how much time should they be spending on one-on-ones? Great question, because it's obviously taking them away.
It's a really good question.
Contributing. Yeah. I'll let you handle that one first.
Yeah, so, well, I don't know that there's a right answer. I'd be remiss if I said I did, but I think I can give some first world examples or direct experience. We've had that situation on our team. Like I said, folks who've gone from rep to team lead, ultimately to a higher level manager or director. And in that process, very early on, that was a big, I would say that was an honor for them to become a team lead. And so they were doing double duty a little bit with still holding that bag and holding a number from quota attainment, but also, how can they directly influence and help their team mates hit their number? So we were doing an hour of coaching per week with each rep on the team. We try to keep the team size small per team leader manager. At the time, I think it was 5 or 6. So you're talking about 5 or 6 hours a week of individual, and then a team meeting that was about 30 minutes on Mondays and about an hour on Fridays. So, all in that scenario, you're in for, maybe including prep time, 9 or 10 hours a week with a team of 6, 7, 8. And that was really big. We do that cycle or cadence of initial meeting, start of the week. We do our coaching sessions actually early midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we do a Friday wrap up where we kind of have the wins, losses, and what we wish we could have back for next week as a group, which is a major area to learn from your teammates on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there. And the only thing I'll add, just from personal experience, I've been a player coach earlier on in my career, and it's interesting. It kind of depends on where is their time best spent, and you'll kind of see if they're really filling the shoes of a manager and maybe they should be promoted, or are they actually better still as that individual contributor. So it's kind of interesting, and play around with it. And, the weeks that they're spending more time coaching, are you seeing the next few weeks, have a spike from the rest of the team, or having them off the phone? Is that actually driving your team down? So it's kind of an interesting experiment to see if that person is actually ready to move up to a manager, because if their coaching is delivering great results for the team, then it's kind of a no-brainer that you put more time there. My 2 cents on that. All right, let's go. This is a good question too, which can be very difficult to overcome. Brian, any tips to overcoming a toxic culture that's already in place?
Yeah, that's tough. So I'm guessing this may be a new manager, new director, VP who comes in, could be a promotion within, and they realize that's been holding you back. I think the first thing is you've got to be super honest that there are problems, that there are challenges. And a lot of times if the culture is bad, the results are also bad. So you start with, hey, here are the facts. The facts are maybe we're not hitting our number, we're not having the effort, we're not putting in the activity, and that's got to change. And that can be kind of the leverage point to start making some tough changes, having tough conversations about what do we want this to look like in the future. And really what you're trying to do is to build, what I would say is some consensus in your team, some folks who can get onto your bandwagon and say, we may not like the way that we're managing this team right now, how we're performing, what that means to me as a quota carrying rep or a commission-based rep, and they buy in. So number one is I'd always start with being super open and very transparent that this is not the way that we want it to be. We can do more, we can be better, we can have a more fun, engaging, successful, development-focused place to work. And then you get the feedback, and then you hear people say, well, I want X, I think that we should do Y, I wish that we did Z. And maybe I'll put my founder hat on for a second, like, you can't always take everything people say and go direct. Sometimes you got to grok what they're asking for and then make the best of that recipe and hand that back over. And that's a big challenge, but I'd start with the facts, and I would try to be hyper transparent with the team.
Yeah. Oh, excellent advice. I think especially if you're a new manager, it's going to be very difficult if you try and attack culture and just say, hey, we have a toxic culture, because that's too ambiguous. So exactly like Brian said, you can't say we have a toxic culture, but you can say, hey, why does everyone leave at 5 p.m. sharp? How come we never collaborate on, different stories that we have with prospects? How come there's only, 25% that are hitting quota? Those are things that you can, hit head on versus, culture.
And Scott, what you can do really quickly, I'll spend another minute on this because I'll give you a pickup game basketball example real quick that every manager in here can listen to. You're playing pickup. You don't know everyone. You walk into the gym. You're on a team. Team sucks. People are just taking random shots. It's not very fun. The first thing that you do when you want to change that is you start high-fiving and you start talking and you start saying good job after people do anything good. Get a rebound, play good defense, take a good shot. Whatever it is, the most minimum amount of solid effort someone puts in, you make sure that you give them a big high five and a great job. You can do that on your floor day one with literally no other special tools, no effort, nothing else. All you have to do is show up, listen, and then be, I would say, hyper, active with the praise and recognition. And that will start getting people's ears tuned into what success looks like, what good things they can be doing on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully they'll start sharing that praise as well within the team.
I love it. And I'm going to sneak one more question in. There's some good ones here. This one, I think this encompasses a lot of hesitation around coaching that a lot of organizations feel. So this is from Mike. Mike, thanks for the question. We have managers at coaching, so they've got that down, but haven't cracked the code to measure how their coaching is impacting rep performance. What tools have you uncovered that can track coaching sessions and report ROI on coaching?
Man, that's, I'd be remiss if I didn't say ambition. Ambition is absolutely see that. I know that's not
I didn't
what you
plan
guys
that,
are
by
here
the way.
for.
That was Mike Faber.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. No, but there are tools that help you do that. Ambition is definitely one, or keeping track of the KPIs and the objectives that you care about and how reps are achieving those week to week. But look, Mike, if you're like, hey, we don't have this in the budget yet, we're working on it, it's going to be there in 6 months, 12 months, whatever, you go build a few, it's going to be a little bit more work, but you go build some spreadsheets that tell you, week to week, what are happening with the key reps you want. And you get in there and you share the spreadsheet with them ahead of every meeting. And you say, here's what we did last week. Here's what we're focused on the next time. And then you go measure it and see the delta, see what the increase or decrease has been. And then you put up some thoughts on the whiteboard and say, what was different? Did you lead with a different script? Did you have a different value proposition? Did you call a different ICP? And so you just start to try to figure out the scientific method. What was changed from last week to this week? And let's try to minimize the variables so that we can have a really specific conversation on what's different and where we want to take it. So, I definitely think that we can help with that. And if you reach out to growth@ambition.com, I'd love to talk more about it, but you can also do this yourself. And I think there's a lot of good tools for teams today to excel at that.
I love it. Awesome. Well, that takes us to our time. I think it's a perfect place to end. And I'm just seeing now, Catherine Davis has a question in the chat. I usually go through the Q&A section at the bottom. So sorry, Catherine, but definitely email growth@ambition.com and Brian will sort it out because I think it's a great question. But
for sure.
Anyway, Brian, you're the man. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. You have a ton of great insights and hope to have you back soon so I can continue picking that brain of yours.
Enjoy Scottsdale, man. Well, everyone have a great afternoon and hope to see you all at Unleash, right?
Absolutely. Unleash, March 10th to 12th. It's sold out now, unfortunately, but next year. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.